Does everything have a bright side to it? Of course. Doesn't always outweigh the negatives, but everything has a bright side to it. This makes happiness a choice. And here we say that the discipline of being happy is the ultimate discipline. With that said, welcome to the Ultimate Discipline Podcast, where we meet with people who are practitioners of this exact discipline, and we hear their cool stories of cultivating happiness through challenges in their life. I am your host, Sean Greenspan. Let's get to it. Hey guys, and welcome to the Happiness Discipline. I have been waiting for this interview, Joe, since I met you, and we had hamburgers together in a house by ourselves. I don't think I've ever met somebody in a house that I'm staying in, just us two. That's kind of how I met them, but we'll get into that story later. But I met Joe. We'll get into the story about why we're in that house. But I met Joe as part of a crew for our buddy Don, who's doing a 250 mile race, and me and Joe got to have a nice dinner, and it was really impressive how humble you were. You know, we were just talking and you're like, yeah, you know, I'm training for a 100-mile run, which is amazing for anybody. And there's not a lot of people in their 60s that are, you know, doing 100-mile runs. And then, you know, we started talking, you knew I was interested in working out. You're like, I have a push-up, you know, challenge that I do regularly, you know. And I was like, oh, cool. Tell me a little bit about it. It's a Bring Sally Up, Bring Sally Down song. You're supposed to hold push-ups the whole time. I thought I was in shape, could not do that. Well, then we got into the fact that you're the CEO of a big company. You have a long history of being CEO. You know, you have this blog you've kept up with for over a decade. You've been tracking your workouts for 2 decades and haven't missed time. You have the high performance life, and you're an author of a book. And I was just so enamored by all of this that I've been itching for this for a long time, and I'm happy it's here. So thank you so much for making the time, Joe.
Oh, wow. You know, it's so funny to hear people talk about you. You know, it's like, oh man, just a regular guy. That's, you know, is the about choices, Sean. I think the reason that we both were sort of captivated by the conversation was you're actively making choices. I'm actively making choices. We're living intentionally. And I don't think we meet enough people who live intentionally. And I think that in it sort of is the opportunity for everyone to seize it at any point in one's life is important. But for sure, find people in your community who are sort of more like you. It's fun because it's encouraging, it's exciting. We learn from each other. And yeah, I'm thrilled to, you know, be in your circle now too. So this is fun.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What do you mean by choices? You know, I think a lot of people think life happens to them and they don't have the choices that you do. Yeah, I'd love to hear you expand on why choices are so important.
Yeah, I think, you know, like we'll start a bit at the end of the story, because the beginning of the story, like, it's not so obvious that you really do. But I start with the first thing, which is there's 168 hours in the week. And that's up to you how you use that time. Some of it we're going to sleep, some of it we're going to work, some of it we're going to, I don't know, watch TV, eat food, go to the bathroom, whatever they are. That is our currency. And I'm an outcome-focused person. If you want to create an outcome, then you make choices. If I want to be able to run a marathon, then I have to choose how to do that. If I want to, you know, I don't know, ultimately be a CEO of a company, I have to think about that. And the time horizon is always sort of the piece that I think people get somewhat frustrated with, because our impatience gets in the way. But I don't know why we'd want to rush through life anyway. But give yourself some time, make good choices about how you use your time. And, you know, and then we can keep going, like, you know, spend time with the right people, hang out in the right environment. You know, we have so much more control over our lives than we give ourselves credit for. And often I think, you know, as you and I were talking on the trail in Wyoming, you know, whose life are you going to live, yours or someone else's? And I decided a long time ago that I was going to live my life, which is I'm going to make my choices both inspired by my own thinking as well as other people who have accomplished a lot, because I don't know, maybe I didn't like where I started and I wanted to change it. And so that's, how the journey starts. But then later on, you live that way. And then, boy, every day is much better. I love your podcast name. When I was writing my book, I thought about the name Always Happy, Never Satisfied. But yeah, you
Sure.
could choose to be happy, and that's a choice. Similarly, why would you
Yeah.
want to live any other way?
You touched on something beautiful right there. Why would you want to live any other way? And it's funny, my dad looks at life similarly to me, but on like the opposite side of the coin, if that makes sense. He likes to challenge things. That he would tell you that too. And he told me, he's like, happiness and discipline don't belong in the same sentence ever. Period. End of story. I'd like to tell you how I came up with the name. And I was reading Dan Millman's book. I've read a lot of Dan Millman's book. He's been a guest on here. He's awesome. The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And there's a moment in that book when they basically reference an old Stoic principle that everything just is, but you get to determine how you kind of react to it, right? And okay, cool. That we get that. Makes sense. Now, really put yourself in your shoes that like 6 days in a row, you haven't got good sleep. You've been traveling, you've been off your schedule, haven't eaten as well as possible, and you just don't feel good. And then bam, something happens at work that gets you flustered. And while you're dealing with it, something happens in your personal life. It might be difficult at that time to be like, nice, this happened for a reason that I don't know it yet, but I'm excited about it, even though on the surface it looks negative, right? Like that's a very difficult thing to do. I think that's the appropriate response, right? Is that like, I'm not saying don't feel your emotions. That's a separate discussion. But
Yeah.
I think the response is basically like, we have this new information that's reality, and what do we do with it? Because it is reality, and like, and how can this be a good thing? An example I talk about was 3 years ago, I got fired by a client who represented 45% of my company's income. And that, looking back, was the catalyst. We were the same revenue 2 years in a row. And since then, we've doubled 3 years in a row because they were taking up 75% of my time, Joe, but 40% of my income. So that thing that I said, oh my God, how do I make payroll, ended up being the #1 catalyst for Greenspan Consulting in the history of the organization.
Yeah.
In that moment, I'm not gonna say whether I was calm or not and happy, but in that moment, it requires a lot of discipline. And some of the things you're doing when business and writing your blog and tracking your workouts and training for 100-mile ultra marathons, what I admire in you is that you're building a discipline muscle for something that hasn't even, like, for a challenge that hasn't even showed up on the horizon yet.
Yeah. You and I probably need 24 hours for this conversation, but trying to touch on a couple of points. I graduated college a long time ago, and my first job was uninspiring at best, $7 an hour. I was working in the mayor's office in New York City, a terrible commute, couldn't afford anything. $14,000 a year. What could you do with that, right? And like first week of the job, I took the train into work. I got out of the train and my car was stolen. Like, oh gosh, that's not fun. Realized that my father's golf clubs were in the trunk. That was even worse. Got home finally after they came and picked me up, and my girlfriend broke up with me. And there I am with no money, no car, no girlfriend, out of college, making no money. And I was thinking, like, was that the beginning or the end? And it actually became the beginning, not the end. Instead of being somewhat, sort of upset about it, yeah, annoyed, yeah, sure, the emotions are true and real and feelings matter. But that isn't what we choose to do. We don't live in that state. We accept that moment. And then we say, oh, well, what do I do from this moment? And then from then I realized I needed to sort of redefine and rethink the career part, the way that I was going to live my life, et cetera. So at every one of those moments, I think when it feels like something, whether it was your experience or any others, it's the beginning or the end, no one would want it to be the end. right? Like, how could that? But we sometimes take ourselves out of the game as a result. And I think that sometimes, like, so I love the Stoic philosopher, which is worry about what you can control, not what you can't control. But sometimes the other part of the psychology for me is throw yourself into something and trust that it'll work. And, so I started blogging over 10 years ago. I didn't know where that would go, but I threw myself into it with a sincerity that with enough time, it would grow into something much more deep, much more
Yeah.
meaningful. And you just have to sometimes trust the process. The mystery will show itself.
Uh, yeah. It's more, first of all, I think it's more fun when you trust the process, right? It's like, you, I have this saying, I'm going to say that I'm coining this phrase. Maybe I'm not, but it's that if you can't tell the future, don't judge the current moment.
Mm.
And that's something I live by because, again, like I think it's reasonable to say that that low point that as a 62-year-old man, you look back and say, like, wow, that was the turning point. That was probably in retrospect one of the best moments of your life. Like the fact that you just naturally recalled that on this podcast, it really affected you and motivated you to do all this other things. So in fact, all of those things that didn't even happen at once, it happened over several months, like to that one moment, right? No girlfriend, money, car. That's probably, one of the better things that has happened to you in your life. And it's called, I talk about making decision in a time tube where it's
Mhm.
like, if like a very simple way to think about it is cool. Here's a big bowl of ice cream for 15 minutes. It's great. But then, it increased, like obviously just a little bit increases your chance of getting certain diseases, being overweight. You're going to feel sluggish after. So it's like overall eating that ice cream might have been a horrible thing for you, even though in the moment it felt great. And most things that we should be doing are the opposite, right? Like mile 80 of that 100 that I was pacing on last month. Well, it didn't look like it felt great in the moment, Joe, but I don't think you'd regret it for 1 second.
I think
And
that, yeah, like this is a bit of that. There's a difference between, and they have the same sort of feeling, right? Wanting it over and wanting to quit. They're different, right? No human actually wants the pain, but owning it is okay. Quitting isn't. That's the reaction to it. That is what is up to us. And
quitting
so,
is the reaction. Mm.
yeah, and that's what I kept going through then. There was that at least a third of the race where my stomach and my head were just not working well. And I said, "Oh my God, I have 18 more hours to go." And I was like, "Oof, wouldn't you like a way for this to end?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the way to end it is to get to the finish line. There's no other end." But it was uncomfortable, yeah. But I think that is what scares people off. And I think there was some other people who said this, that pain is temporary, quitting lasts forever. And I think it is in this, it's said they sometimes sound so silly, right? It's like, why are the Stoics that's 2,000 years ago? Why are they still relevant today? Because, the human system hasn't changed all that much. There are a lot of variables that we have to deal with. And, why do the Navy SEALs train the way they do? They want to be able to operationalize all their skills in pretty crazy moments. We call it uncomfortable, being comfortable while you're uncomfortable. But we have that opportunity every day. And yeah, I like the word happiness. And I every once in a while people try and pull you away from that. So you have to resist that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Um, you talked about trust. You talked about trust in the process, trust it'll work. That is a huge element of the happiness discipline. I have this vision. The happiness discipline is going to be a book. It's going to be like a protocol for people to live. I have this vision that we're building it out to. And one of the things that it relies on is um, I'm blanking right now, is visualizing success, right? Like manifestation, the law of attraction, the law of vibrations, right? Think, feel something, focus on something, and that's what you'll get in this life. The law of attractions, it's something that a lot of people, once they come across, they're like, what? Like this really works? It's a very simple concept and it's very simple to do. It fits into a category I call simple but difficult. I'm Yeah, simple but difficult. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or simple but not easy, right? It makes sense, it's clear. And I think you'll see how it relates to the happiness discipline in that simple is all the time, focus on your goal and trust it'll work in your body. Meaning, if you want to grow a company and you have two people quit and a client fire you, you can get yourself quickly back to a deep feeling of like, this is going to work out so well. And I see the future, I taste it, and we're just along the ride right now. That is the happiness discipline. That
Mm-hmm.
requires discipline. Now, this word discipline, the way to make that actionable for people is to objectively measure things. And you taught me that more than maybe anybody, that, it's very simple. If you're doing something to build discipline, just track your workout every day,
Yep.
um, you, you told me that you thought you were healthy and then you're like, you kind of realized you weren't. And then you're like, oh, cool. I'll just create objective measures of health, right? You changed your diet, you've changed your workout and you track it all. And, you are like your diet, your health, like your mental health, like you are healthy. Like it'd be very difficult to prove otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's what it's all about, is just building that discipline. And um, I'll tell you, Joe, I have woken up early and exercised since I was literally a little kid. I used to wake up before my parents and like run around the house and tell myself I'd try to do 100 laps before they wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I woke up this morning, man, I was in the middle of a dream. I was playing basketball in my dream. It felt so good. I've worked out twice a day, every day for I think the whole year. And I had a thought this morning. I was like, I don't need to hit this morning workout, like, and in reality, for the physical element of it, I didn't. But man, that like I needed to, because
Mm.
you need to build that discipline, because as you grow in life, what I feel is that your challenges grow and you need to continue to like build that discipline up so that you can face the bigger challenges. I mean, as a $7 an hour worker, when you just got out of school, your challenges probably weren't as big as now the CEO of a big organization.
Yeah, so many interesting key points. The thing that always strikes me, a couple of things, I learned this later, right? It's like, I think a lot of people don't understand that if you describe what the outcome is that you want to create, then you can build a plan to that. And if you give yourself time, you will find a way to get pretty close to it. And I think that we think stuff happens to us, but it doesn't really, it's only what we decide to do. So I think that was what I learned early on, was like, if I put in the effort, I had a pretty good outcome. It changed something. In the beginning, it was, hey, I worked a lot. I, was able to achieve in my work environment. I became a partner in a big firm, Ernst and Young. I actually made a boatload of money. You know, but like I had no reason that should have happened. It was just, how did I make that happen? I put the effort in. I believed in delivering for people when I made a commitment. I was clear on what I wanted as an outcome from it. And it developed. And I realized that you could continue to apply that over and over again. You could apply that into your physical life, right? That's why I started the spreadsheet, was to say, I need to make a commitment to having, improved physical capability. Well, one is it's fun because it allows you to do stuff you wouldn't have been able to do. You could go rock climbing, or you could swim or run or bike or hike or
Yep.
explore, or like whatever. Like all of a sudden, you became capable of doing activities you wouldn't have been able to do before. And then, you think about, well, could I be a writer? Well, I wasn't a writer before, but I sat down and, if you practice, imagine anyone listening to this, imagine if you did something for the next 10 years every day. Do you think you'd be better at it at the end of 10 years? I think the answer is probably yes. Forget objective. You just are better, right? From just the sheer repetition. We know this. I rode my bike 15,000 miles a couple of years in a row and said to Anthea, I think I actually know how to ride a bike. And she just laughed at me. I'm like, I know, no, but like, I really feel one with this machine after all of those miles. So I don't get bored. I get excited about the opportunity because at each moment I'm increasing my capability and it's going to give me a return that I don't even know is there today, but I get better. And then, wow, then you are more than you ever thought. Like I'm now an author. Like who thought I'd write a book or write a blog or have a podcast or be on television or create as an executive producer a TV series, or just like they're just ridiculous, Sean. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that I did all these things. Like I literally, grew up, went to school in the Bronx most of my life. We had nothing. I had nothing. I didn't, we were just a good family. I had great parents, but not all the things you would think would get you a starting point. I didn't go to Ivy League school. I didn't have all the cool friends. Just took the resource that, was given to me by whatever divine power anyone wants to believe in. I said, boy, I should use this thing the best I can. And it had just surprising, but really actually understanding or understood aspects of the outcomes because how I applied it. So
yeah, you use that resource time, huh? Pretty well. It's crazy how it compounds.
Well, I don't think that we fully understand the power of this system. Like sometimes people don't like that I call my whole who I am as a system. I'm not trying to like say that it's like a robot. It's just there are pieces of it that operate in a certain way. The more I understand them, the difference between biology and lifestyle, like and how do they complement each other, and I think that there's a lot of people who like to give me well, you don't understand. I'm like, well, no, actually I do, because I started with nothing but just decided that, if you give yourself 20 or 30 years, what couldn't you accomplish?
Yeah. Let's dive into that because the you don't understand is an interesting one. Every single person is unique. Everyone's problems are different. Everyone still deals with the same 24 hours a day. That's like a baseline, right? And it's really funny because I remember vividly being college visiting my brother, and someone like came in and said something to me, like one of his like older frat brothers, like saying like basically you don't understand, right? He and it was kind of a rude comment, and my brother, who's like a pretty calm guy, like got really frustrated, and like he wasn't defending me, he was defending like everybody, saying like don't ever tell someone they don't understand. You have no idea what they've been through, but it's also irrelevant. You know what I mean? It's like there's no way to say, Joe, you started with this, I started with this, you had it better, because the world is so complex. And in my opinion, the bottom line is very simple. It's irrelevant who had it better. I don't think it's possible to determine who had it better. And it's simply everyone is where they are. So by saying you don't understand only is hurting yourself. Like for like if someone told me like I don't understand them, okay, maybe I don't, I don't understand the situation you're in. It's like, that's fine, but like, don't let that be your excuse. And, to anyone listening, that's something I would put out there is like, talking about my brother again, he actually wrote on a sheet of paper behind, he's a musician. He wrote this when he was a kid. He said, make excuses to get the job done. And it was in quotes. I don't know where I heard it, but everyone makes excuses to not get the job done, right?
Yeah.
Make excuses to get the job done. Like,
No,
like.
so I don't think that I think that the key, right? I do not try to campaign for a lifestyle for anyone. What I do is live a lifestyle that proves that something can happen if you live that way. And then if others want to do that, that's up to them. So the agency is theirs. And so if they say, look, I can't, I won't, you don't understand, those are for them to work on, right? That is, because if you're there, Sean, I've been in selling for my whole life, right? So when I was 16 years old, I was selling housewares in the department store. Well, what I found is this: there's three groups of people. There's the yeses, there's the maybes, and there's the nos, right? So the yeses are already convinced of doing something. The maybes are conditionals. They'll do it if you can overcome their objection, and the nos are just not going to. We spend a lot of time on the nos.
Yep.
We shouldn't, because our job is not to convince someone of something. But if you're conditional and say, hey, I would do it if this, or you could tell me if that. But for the most part, everyone has to decide where they want to go, what they want to be. This is up to us. And so the excuse is usually our inability to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions. The word disappointment is more painful because that means something I could have done, I should have done, didn't do. I let myself down, I let you down. But an excuse is only just sort of this obfuscation of what's possible. But amen, if someone wants to live their life the way they want to, as long as they don't damage anyone else along the way. By the way, I think some ways we do, because lifestyle costs a lot to the rest of us. But truth is that for the people listening, I think that you're either a maybe or a yes, and you want to do something more significant with your life. And then that's where who you start hanging out with, what you start consuming in terms of content and thoughts, how you go and apply them, at what level. And then this sort of first principle, which is make a commitment to yourself and then follow through and don't let yourself down. And then you're going to get to see the feedback loop gets really strong and positive. Start to see, oh, wow, all of a sudden something different happened. I showed up differently. I got a different opportunity. I had more success. Why did that happen? It's all about this sort of, I have now switched from the no to the maybe onto the yes, which is that I've worked through the conditions in the way into now I am committed myself. Once I'm committed to myself, I accomplish a lot more.
That was extremely well said, Joe. Thank you for that. I felt like I was sitting back and just like learning. And I think what resonated with me the most was when you said that, if you do want more out of this life, at your own discretion of what more means, right? Like not what Joe thinks is more, what Sean thinks, but whatever you think, there's a way to get there. And again, trying to bring things down to the tactical, like if I was to push anything on anyone, it would be just ensure to get quiet time with regularity to find out if there is more that you want, and if so, what that is. That's really like it, and if you don't, or if you're doing it, that's awesome,
Yeah, like what other word I like to use? Like, so define better. Like, so if I said to Sean, okay, Sean, you're at this stage of your life, define better. Just write it down.
Yeah.
And then let's go get it. You might actually say, I don't know if there's anything better today. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to improve or increase or do more or have more or do any of that. But when you find yourself sort of a little bit stuck, you don't like what you have, then define better. And then let's go find it together. And I think that's the key. We usually just get frustrated and we never define the better. What we define is what we don't like. The way out is through better.
Yeah, reminds me of, I was listening to someone speak, a life coach who was talking about what he does, and he always says something similar, like write down like what you want out of this life. And a lot of people say, I don't want to be tired all the time. I don't want to be in financial debt. I don't want this and I don't want that, right? And he's like, Okay, but we said write down what you do want. You know what I mean? So it's funny. It's a framework, thinking in the positive
Hmm.
and creating, right? Um, I want to go way back to where you were talking about trust,
Hmm.
because I think trust is extremely important. I do a word of the year every year, and my word this year is confidence. And it's, in Latin and in Spanish, it translates to with faith, basically. And you said to trust it'll work. And I think a lot of times people think confidence is like, walk in the room and,
Hmm.
stand up straight, whatever. And I think, confidence is more a carrying faith, right, with you along the way, that something's going to pan out, and carrying it with you through the highs and the lows, right? I like that's that, I'm just relating it all back to the happiness discipline
Hmm.
unintentionally, but that's what it is, right? Like life's obviously like this. Maybe sometimes it's more shallow, maybe sometimes it's, bigger waves. And maintaining your composure at the top is hard, but I think what's even harder is just keeping that faith while you're at the bottom. Um, and the word confidence is just, I don't know, it's one of the most powerful things. Wim Hof has shown how confidence can affect you at a cellular level. And everything that he does. How familiar are you with what Wim Hof is doing?
Hmm. Yeah, I've
Uh,
followed it quite a bit. Yep.
and so there's three pieces. There's the cold, there's the breathing, and then there's the mindset.
Hmm.
I had a pleasure to have him on the podcast. I went to his retreat and spent time with him, and he is all about confidence. That is the Wim Hof method, actually, is confidence. It's, like he he just goes into situations and the breathing and the cold are the training or the methods to tap into that part of the brain, but he goes in and understands that he has the ability to do certain things that seem miraculous, and then his body reacts, like the biology, the chemistry changes, his
Hmm.
cells react. Um and and you could see it when you're with him. His confidence is unwavering, Joe. We were at this retreat, 150 of us outside listening to him talk, and he's talking about all this research going on. Like the energy, you could hear a pin drop, like his energy was so amazing. And this world-class like doctor came in like right after him and started talking. And the doctor actually kind of went on a tangent actually about like another thing that he's doing. And like calmly, but like very assertively, Wim Hof he said out loud, he goes to the doctor, he said, "You're either going to watch us change the world or join us." And, to say that to someone that's like dedicating his life to studying how to change the world in a very similar way, and
Hmm.
just to say that with absolute unwavering confidence, it just, those are your options. Watch us change the world, join
I like
us.
that. That's a good one. Just as a clearly I like the dictionary like you do because these words really help us. But so I think that the definition of faith is believing without seeing.
Mm,
And there is a moment in our lives when that's what we have to do is believe it without seeing it, which means you're believing in yourself. Means that, so here's the key, right? So if you have practiced this idea of making a commitment to yourself and staying true to that, then the faith comes from that because like the word trust is interesting because it's sort of two sides of the trust word. The trust is that whatever I expect against some objective measure is going to happen. Like I expect the brakes in my car are going to work. I trust they're going to work. What does that mean? You can put pressure on the wheel and it's going to stop the car. Well, it's really interesting. Did you do anything to validate that? Not really. Socially, we understand there's some contract that's there. Okay, so that's a very objective way. We could go in before we got in the car, we could measure the braking on that, and then I would trust that that system would work. The same concept holds through with a relationship. You would try and establish some expectation, and to the expectation, I would measure then I would be able to trust you. And I can trust you again because you delivered against that expectation. So the trust thing is actually always against some expectation that some outcome is going to happen as you would predict it to happen or as it's been promised to happen. And that's what trust is all about. I trust that Joe is going to show up for the podcast at this time. Well, why would you do that, right? Well, because you established that as a condition.
Yeah.
I agreed to it. If I didn't, then you'd be like, something must have happened, which can. That didn't break the trust, but what should have happened if I didn't, would be I get back to you and say, by the way, my internet didn't work. So I wouldn't have violated the trust expectation because you'll now understand. So I think that it is pretty basic, but sometimes it takes a step back to establish that foundation and framework so that you could make some sort of educated judgment against it.
I like your love for the dictionary, and I appreciate diving into that the word trust, and it is trust is different than faith, quite different actually.
Yeah, I think like I've always loved getting onto sort of the stage when I was in my keynote sort of phase of life, and I was at this page. It's sort of like the currency of life is in the dictionary. And so you could just open the dictionary and you could become a powerful person. Like if you put words like this: compassion, commitment, grit, determination, patience, curiosity, courage. Like there were 7 words I gave you. Imagine if you acted on those 7 words in a very serious and sincere way. Like all of a sudden, Sean would become this incredibly powerful person. So that was in the dictionary, man. It was written down for you. The word inspire, like you used the Latin before, I think, or I used it Spanish. And the Latin for inspire is to breathe air into. So to inspire someone is to breathe into them something so they feel like expansive. And so
I like that.
This is the way that you can feel life, right? You can actually, if you don't dig that level deeper, we all try and think we make something up, but I think I coined this one, which was the intersection of curiosity and courage is where magic happens. So I'm really interested and I have the will and I do both. And then like, whoa.
Yeah. Have you heard of Stephen Kotler? He's a PhD and he studies like the flow mindset.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He has a book called he has a couple that I've read, Doing the Impossible. That's definitely not the title. It's something about doing the impossible. And he actually talks about ways to manufacture flow, right? And we'll use flow and magic interchangeably right now. And that's one of the things that he talks about is this concept of finding basically what your interests, like where your interests are, and then, like what your skill set is. And it just kind of reminded me of it. I really think you'll like it. The name of Stephen Kotler, it doesn't matter the name. He has a couple tremendous books.
Yeah, I'll check it out. But yeah, I think that, I find that, there are a few words shouldn't be in the dictionary, like the word can't. Like, I don't know what the purpose of that word is. Never really good purpose. You can't do that. Like, why would you decide before you gave it a try? Like, might as well just give it a go and find out. Did you know this? 2017, I ran a marathon on 6 continents in 6 days, constructed this idea. Took me years to sort of figure it out and did it myself and booked these commercial flights. And I was going to go from Sydney to Singapore to Johannesburg. Ankle. What if you get sick? What if, I'm like, why don't I just go find out? Like, just go find out. Maybe any of those things might happen, but I don't want to like decide before I go, and then I'm not going to go. Like,
there'd be no option. right? Like it's like if you just didn't do that. Let's play with that for a second. Whether can't has any word or like any use in this diction
Mm.
in this language of ours. Because generally, I know what you're saying. It's like can't. It's like if someone said I can't, it's like under specific circumstances, and it's like there's like a whole context to it. If you want to,
Well, I think what we do is let's take control. If we really want to play around with it, then let's say I won't do that. Okay, that is
Mm,
conscious. I decided not to. Okay, that's fine. But I can't is making some sort of predetermined decision that why would I decide that? Like I don't know. Maybe I can't be a neurosurgeon at this point in my life, but I don't know that I can't. Hey, I mean,
yeah,
maybe I can't win the gold medal in 17 of them or whatever, like Michael Phelps did. But I don't think that's what we're talking about. I usually think that what we say that around is disabling ourselves from finding out. Now, can't usually is a time issue more than it is anything else, meaning like, well, I can't run a marathon. Okay, what if you gave yourself 5 years? Could you do it then?
yeah.
Probably. So like sometimes we just have to reframe and stay away from the just the end of the story before the story was even written.
I I love that. My life coach, when he says I'm trying to,
Mm.
he like explodes. He's like, I don't understand what you mean by you're trying to. Like, like I'll, you know, I'm trying to, get in better shape, at Tony, and he'll be like, you, are you taking the actions to do that, or are you not? And he actually starts to do something with me. It's beautiful. I have to answer it everything in one word, basically yes or no. So it'll be like this. Um, Sean, you told me you wanted to grow your company, and a key thing to grow your company would be to hire a marketing manager to take things off your plate. Have you done that? I always start with, well, so, and he's like, what? He's like, it's very simple, Sean. You did or you didn't. He's like, did you do it? No, Tony. And he's like, okay. And then he's like, cool. And then he'll go, another question I have for you is, did you determine that that was the key step to growing your company and freeing up your time? And I'll be like, well, he's like, no, yes or no. I'll be like, yes, Tony. And he's like, and did you commit that to me? Yes, Tony. He goes, so I just want to recap what happened. You determined this is going to be what you need to do. You committed it to me, and then you just didn't do it, right? And I still have to answer one question. I'll be like, yes, Tony. Yes. Right. And it's funny because then he wants to open it up and understand what happened so he can dig and make sure it doesn't happen again. But he does give me a clear picture because I guess other people experience this too. I start to muddy the water.
Mm.
Like, you don't get it. I brought in some new clients. I was handling those new clients, wanted to give them attention. Cool. Are those new clients the number one thing that's going to help you grow? Because no, now I'm going to need to keep up with them when I've told him that I need a senior marketing manager that can take some things off my plate so I
Yeah.
can focus on growth. And he's like, so, you were distracted, right? And again, yes, Tony, I was distracted. And it really is funny. And clarity is really important. You taught me this in our short time, Joe, knowing each other. You really have taught me a lot, and I know you're bashful
Appreciate
around
that.
that, but I want to share it because there are two things. One was I told you that I kind of stopped drinking over the
Mm.
last 18 months, and that I kind of, I felt that it was kind of like challenging sometimes, like say that, and he was like, yeah, because you kind of did it. And I know you haven't had a drink in 10 or 15 years,
Yep.
but you told me that zero is easier to manage than
Hmm.
some.
Yep.
And you're so right. Like to sometimes have a drinks means every time I need to reevaluate the situation. I also open the door for peer pressure versus I don't drink. And I was thinking about you last night. I went to my friend's house. They pulled out 6 different beers. They're like, Sean, we got all these beers. I said, thank you so much, Troy, but I don't drink. And it's funny, I every time if I said I don't really drink, they're like, dude, cold one, it's summertime.
Right.
But when I said I don't drink, he goes, oh, that's awesome.
Mm.
And you just put them
Right.
back in the fridge.
Yep.
Um, and you also like really showed me the importance of being clear with like your language when I asked you about why you write a blog every day. And you said, we talked about that. And then you said, some people ask, Joe, when are you going to cut it out with the blog already? And you told me, I don't understand the question because the blog is the way that you think every day. So stopping blogging would be similar to stopping eating, drinking water, breathing. Like, it's just like a function. Um,
Right.
so that's something I appreciate. But let me
Yeah.
actually hear your thoughts on that blog because think a lot of people, I think a lot of people don't think every day. Earl Nightingale used to talk about that.
Yeah, I appreciate just on the drinking thing. That's actually really also recognition of that our system is sometimes a little more fragile than we would like it to be. It's the resiliency factor is a little bit low because of some of the things that could happen. And so if you want to achieve the objective, then when it isn't in consideration, then you don't have to use any emotional system to actually help you make a decision. That's why the drinking, 15 years I haven't had a drink. It's very easy. I don't put any energy into that. So then, therefore, you're never under any strain because there are days where you're under strain for whatever the reason. I got a deadline, I got to get my workouts in, I got to get to a plane, it's late, but if you put some additional strain in there and then you're asked to make a hard decision, then our system is probably not operating at its optimal. And then we will then sometimes do what we didn't want to do. And so if it's important, then take it and make it much more objective rather than emotional. And then it's easy to decide. So you're right, 0 is always 0. It's a math thing, right? You multiply 0 times anything, you get 0. We always said that 1 equals n, because if you have 1, then it's easy to have 2, and it's easy to have 5, and it's easy to have 10. No judgment in that. It's only what are we trying to control for? And, truth of the matter is that alcohol is probably not that good for us either. So we can get into that.
Yeah.
On the blog, what I found was that I had become too much of a consumer in life. I consumed a lot and I created nothing. And so I felt that was just not leveraging my full capacity because, it's like a little bit of, if you only heard something and never said anything, that would be odd, right? You're only using one channel. We have another channel. And so we have a creative channel that doesn't get exercised if we just consume, which is reading is great. Watching TV can be cool, listening, but you have to turn on this other channel. So this is the capability that you have. And so you have to practice it. So does it have to be every day? No. The reason for me every day is that you guys talk about this a lot, habit stacking and all that. Anything that becomes a habit, I'm not putting any energy into it. It's just what I do. And so it's not a decision. So then I can then create every day, and then I can actually use this channel and make it better. And I can feel more confident as a writer. And in work, I could take something on. I can say, hey, by the way, I'll take on that. I'll write that, and then all of a sudden new opportunities open up. Why did they open up? Well, because of what I did. And so trying to sort of understand how the human system works, the objectives that I want to create and work within its constraints allows me to be more successful. So therefore, like you wouldn't want to brush your teeth every other day and eat every 3 days. These wouldn't be good habits, right? The system needs that on a regular basis. So for me, it actually opened this channel. The second thing it did for me was I realized if I was going to write, and this is what they tell every writer, write for yourself, write assuming no one will ever read it. And so when I started doing that, I was like, oh boy, the one thing you don't want to do is write rants and complaints and negative thoughts. It's like, wow, how would that be? Like, what would be the purpose of that? And so this writing about this high performance life and this journey and this place that I've created puts me into a good place. It's sort of every day there is that time period where I am pushing myself into being creative, thinking positive thoughts. And then the last piece of this is accomplishment. It's like wonderful, man. The dopamine system loves it. I got it done. I feel at peace. And now my whole system just went to another level by making this really interesting, simple decision to write one paragraph every day. Wow. Like, think of how crazy
You change your
that,
whole
right,
chemistry.
right,
Joe, the
right.
concept of creating, I think, versus consuming is a huge piece. And um, I, there's so much that you're doing. And, like, I think a lot of people might say, how can you write a blog every day? You're a CEO and you're a parent and this, and it's like you talked about energy management. And I think that's the biggest takeaway of this all is, managing your energy appropriately and gearing it towards the things that are going to re-energize you. And, that's again, I like to toe this fine line of not pushing people on things, but
Hmm.
doing things myself and sharing them. And that's something that I've been trying to do is accumulate energy, right? And
Hmm.
whether it's who I hang out with, the food I eat, the activities I do, things like that. And Joe, I'm sorry that I'm gonna have to wrap this up here,
Yeah.
but I think you said in the beginning, I forecasted we were gonna end short because in the beginning you said, yeah, we're gonna need 24 hours for this.
Hey, Sean, I appreciate you, what you're doing. Thanks for including me. Let's stay close. There is this sort of curiosity and courage that we together can go create some magic and see who else can do with us on our journey the same thing.
Thank you, Joe.
Hey, thank you for watching today's episode. If you got something out of this, it would mean so much if you could just take a second and give us a rating on whatever platform you're watching it on. And it would mean so much to the world if you could just find one person that you think this message resonates with and you can share that with them. Thank you so much for your support. Looking forward to share the next episode with you.